My parents got married at Bible Baptist Church in Wakarusa, Indiana. And so that was the church that I grew up in until I was 8 or 9, somewhere in there. And then we moved to a church that was about 10, 15 miles away in Goshen, Indiana, another First Baptist church. And in both of those churches, then, I just have real fond memories of some very kind people. When I think about what joyful Christians look like, I think about people like Reed Eby. Reed owned a car dealership in town, but was just one of the friendliest, nicest guys that I remember. I mean, from little. And after that, even after we'd left the church, just so kind and so friendly whenever I saw him. I remember Phil Martin. Phil Martin was a father of someone who was just a few years older than me, but another great, just godly guy, but just, again, so gentle and kind, served in that church. And I had, since I went to school with his sons, saw him throughout different times, and there was one incident in particular, my senior year, where I had to go talk to him about some pretty serious things, and just so kind. What a great example of a good Christian man. And then the last one was sort of my youth pastor. The youth pastor at the time was Greg Lanzin, a wonderful man, but then kind of his assistant was a guy named Jim Schrock. And all my siblings just agree that he was just a wonderful man, just just kind. And all three of these men, I think of them as kind and very gentle. And that is a good thing. I know that there's maybe something about, men ought not to be that way. But as far as for me as a child, looking up to these Christian men, those are the kind of men I wanted to be like. And it's something that I think about a lot, that I am in a long chain of Christian men who have been influential, hopefully, to the next generation. Because I don't know who it was for Phil and for Reed and for Jim, but somebody was a kind Christian for them to teach them how to be for me, and I've tried to be that now for others as well. This idea that there's a chain of disciples is not something that just kind of happens. It's really intentional. Every religion, every group has kind of a chain, and they want to bring up the next people. But for many of them, it's done in violence, like ISIS, or in coercion, like so many cults. And as Christ followers, we say the chain should be linked together by love. This is, and you've heard me say this before, one of the pillars of our church is Christian love. And why? Because Jesus said in John 13, verses 34 and 35, "By this shall all men know that ye are my disciples, if ye have love one to another." Right? He gave them a commandment to love and says, this is going to be the mark, love. So you can have all these church growth seminars. You can go to these things and find out how to grow a bigger church. And I'd say it's easy. Just love others and make Christ known. Church growth isn't hard. You love others, you love one another, and you make Christ known. Now, I understand when some people talk about church growth, they mean people that are not really, saved, what kind of appeals to them, and sometimes what appeals to the flesh, and I'm not interested in that. I really want to make Christ happy, and he'll grow the church accordingly. The church in Thessalonica had been formed in love, I believe, with Paul's kindness. It had become a vibrant, far-reaching testimony. Remember that we said in verse 8 of chapter 1 that people in Macedonia and Achaia had heard about their faith. So it was such a vibrant testimony that people around the region, not like in the next town, but throughout the whole region, heard about that. That would be like people in the cities hearing about, oh, you're First Baptist Church. I've heard that church really loves one another. I've heard that church really loves the gospel, that they really worship the Lord. And as far as geographically, it would be like that, or even hearing about that as far away as Ohio or Arizona. Just, oh, you're a part of First Baptist Church. No, we don't need that kind of notoriety. And that's the thing. The church in Thessalonica, they weren't looking for that notoriety either. They were just doing what Christ commanded them to do, and to love one another, and to believe, and to preach the gospel. And because of that, other believers were encouraged by that. And I don't know about you, but I want to have that kind of impact here. I want to have that kind of working in our own church. In verse number, where is it? I have the wrong verse written down here. The church had been suffering, but they were enduring. And he had an admonition to them to walk. In chapter 2, verse 12, that you would walk worthy of God who hath called you into his kingdom and glory. So again, there's this idea that they were to continue. And Paul then is writing to them in this adversity and telling them that he cared about them, and that was shown in his actions. So we're going to look at 1 Thessalonians chapter 2, and I'm going to read verses 1 through 11, but we'll only look at a few kind of minor points in that passage. So verse 1 says, "For yourselves, brethren, know our entrance in unto you, that it was not in vain. But even after that we had suffered before and were shamefully entreated, as ye know, at Philippi, we were bold in our God to speak unto you the gospel of God with much contention. For our exhortation was not of deceit, nor of uncleanness, nor in guile, but as we were allowed of God to be put in trust with the gospel, even so we speak, not as pleasing men, but God, which trieth our hearts. For neither at any time used we flattering words, as ye know, nor a cloak of covetousness, God is witness. Nor of men sought we glory, nor of you, nor yet of others, when we might have been burdensome as the apostles of Christ. But we were gentle among you, even as a nurse cherisheth her children. So being affectionately desirous of you, we were willing to have imparted unto you not the gospel of God only, but also our own souls, because you were dear unto us. For you remember, brethren, our labor and travail, for laboring night and day, because we would not be chargeable unto any of you, we preached unto you the gospel of God. Ye are witnesses, and God also, how holily and justly and unblameably we behaved ourselves among you that believe. As you know, how we exhorted and comforted and charged every one of you, as a father doth his children, that ye would walk worthy of God, who hath called you unto his kingdom and glory." I want you to notice, first of all, one of the qualities that he was talking about here. Again, Paul's kindness helped them to grow, and it was an example to us of how to help others grow. So we might be a part of that great chain of believers. Now, he uses himself as example, not from pride, but I think from right practice. He was saying, listen, I did things right. Not in a prideful way, but he's saying, I know the right thing to do, and we did it right, and you should follow our example. So that's why in 1 Corinthians 11, verse 1, he says, "Be followers of me, even as I am of Christ." Meaning, if I'm departing from Christ, don't follow me. But as I follow Christ, you should follow my example. And I don't know about you, but it's really nice to have a flesh and blood example. I know that the things that we write that are written in the Bible are for our admonition. We can look at David and Elisha and Elijah and Moses and say, great stalwarts of the faith, we want to be like them. But don't they also feel like larger-than-life characters? I know that if I could take a time machine and go back and meet Abraham, I would be largely unimpressed. You know, I would just like, oh, he's just a guy. You know, go back and see Peter, and it's like, okay, he's just like me, and maybe that would be encouraging. So, but I'm just saying, like, most of those people in the Bible seem so unattainable, but you know who's not? People in our church, people like us who have been through those things and are examples for us. And so Paul's saying, this is who I am, and you know who I am, and I had this example for you. So what qualities then do we need to emulate in order to bring up disciples like Paul was doing? First of all, gentleness like a mother. Notice in verse number 7, "But we were gentle among you, even as a nurse cherisheth her children. So being affectionately desirous of you, we were willing to have imparted unto you not the gospel of God only, but also our own souls, because you were dear unto us." The word gentle there, the root word means to speak softly. He used a soft, gentle tone with them. He treated them as a nurse cherishes her children, meaning her own. This is like a mother. Like as a woman would nurture her own children and cherish them, that's what Paul was doing with them. He was responsible for bringing them to Christ, and he felt very much responsible for their growth. The word cherish there in the Greek literally means to brood. Or to warm. It's the picture of a hen kind of over those eggs, protecting them, making sure that they're just at the right temperature so they can hatch. And if you've ever seen any kind of nature documentary, you know just the way that the Lord has taught these animals to watch over their young or their eggs, and they're very protective of it. And that's what Paul says he was for them as well. He saw them in some ways as fragile, and he knew that they needed help to grow and to stay faithful. In contrast, he didn't exploit them or try to get anything out of them. Again, no doubt there were preachers that were coming through that were trying to get something out of the Thessalonians. You know, they'd come in and they'd say, I'm a preacher. Can we take up a special offering, please? They were trying to get something out of it. And Paul says, you know that when we came to you, we were so wanting to make sure that you didn't think that of us, that we worked, we travailed, we labored night and day. And, you know, he talks about in to the Philippians that they had sent him money when he was in Thessalonica so that he could continue the work, so that he wouldn't go and be like, hey guys, can I have some money for doing the work that I'm doing here? Because he just wanted to make sure that no one thought this is all about money. This is all freely given. Now, why is mother-like gentleness so important? Go over to Romans chapter 14 for a moment. We'll come back here for just a little bit, but Romans chapter 14, I think that one of the reasons that it's good for us to be gentle, especially with new Christians, is just that they don't know as much as maybe they should. And when new Christians are saved, it's very easy for them to fall away. Even though they have the Holy Spirit, even though they have the Bible, you've been at this for so long. You've been reading your Bible, you've heard so much preaching that you kind of take for granted that you understand what the Bible says, even the King James Bible. And you say, well, you know, I get this. It's pretty easy to understand. Yeah, it would be if you've been at this for as long as you have. So I'm not knocking that at all. I'm just saying, kind of try to put your feet in the shoes of someone who's walking in and they don't know anything. Like they don't know who Moses is. They don't know who Paul was. You say Romans, and they're thinking of the actual Romans, not the book to the Romans. And so they're kind of in this, and it can get really frustrating for them, and they can say, you know what, forget all of this. I don't want any of that. The Bible tells us to watch out for others in our practices. So in Romans chapter 14, he's talking about that we ought to watch out for our brothers in Christ. Verse 1, him that is weak in the faith receive ye, but not to doubtful disputations. Don't be friends with somebody so you can argue with them about things that are doubtful. Unclear things, minors. For one believeth that he may eat all things, another who is weak eateth herbs. Let not him that eateth despise him that eateth not, and let not him which eateth not judge him that eateth, for God hath received him. Now in the context, this is something so far away from us. They were talking about maybe Jewish dietary laws, or at least maybe meat offered to idols. You know, do you do this? Do you go on a strict vegetarian because you're not sure about it? There were different people in the church, and Paul's saying, hey, let's not make it so that one is despising another just because they have different standards of how they're trying to follow the Lord. Verse 13, let us not therefore judge one another anymore, but judge this rather, that no man put a stumbling block or an occasion to fall in his brother's way. Verse 15, but if thy brother be grieved with thy meat, now walkest thou not charitably. Destroy not him with thy meat, for whom Christ died. Verse 16, let not then your good be evil spoken of. Verse 19, let us therefore follow after the things which make for peace, and things wherewith one may edify another. For meat, destroy not the work of God. All things indeed are pure, but it is evil for that man who eateth with offense. It is good neither to eat flesh, nor to drink wine, nor anything whereby thy brother stumbleth, or is offended, or is made weak. Again, can you see the care that we are to have for other brothers? He says, you ought to take care to make sure that your brother doesn't stumble. If there's anything you can do to keep that from happening, make it happen. In Hebrews chapter 12, verses 12 through 14, he says, "Wherefore lift up the hands which hang down, and the feeble knees, and make straight paths for your feet, lest that which is lame be turned out of the way, but let it rather be healed. Follow peace with all men, and holiness, without which no man shall see the Lord." Lift up those hands that are hanging down and those feeble knees. Make straight paths for your feet. He says, watch out for others. 1 Thessalonians 5, verse 14, "Comfort the feeble-minded, support the weak, be patient toward all men." Again, there's this idea of caring for one another. Yes, it's true that God will keep them. It is God's work and job to keep them to himself, but he will use us to do that. Cain's question, "Am I my brother's keeper?" is answered in the church, "Absolutely I am." Yeah. I'm saying, there are people who are going to come and go. There are people that aren't part of our church anymore, and that's fine. I just saw recently someone who was a member here until very recently, just recently joined another church, and I say, hey, they joined another church. They didn't stop going anywhere, let's show love and kindness, and I get all that, but there are people, if there's something we can do, sometimes there's not, but if there's something we can do to help keep them and to help keep them on the faith, let's do it. I'll admit, there are people there. Let me say this. There have been people in our church, not anymore, right? Home to be with the Lord or otherwise, but there have been people in our church that were really frustrating to me. And it would have been very easy when they said, we're going to another church, for me to be like, whew, thank you. But I knew that they needed our church. They needed this body of believers. So I did everything I could to try to get them to stay, because I knew that out there on their own, they wouldn't do very, very well. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. I'm just saying there's a responsibility there with us. Paul says when we came in, we were like a nurse, just gently cherishing you, just like a hen kind of watching over you and making sure that everything was right. As much as we can, we should, I think is the idea there. Now, what does that mother-like gentleness look like? Let me say three things. One, understanding the fragility of others. No one seeks after God. We understand that hearts generally are hardened to the things of God. And there are many things in the way, obstacles to coming to Christ. And then when you're saved, you're like a brand new baby. You don't maybe know very much. No, I get it. Some people get saved after being in the church and they know a lot more about the Bible and they can kind of have a little bit of, I'm just saying, some guy off the street doesn't know anything. He comes in and all he knows is that all his sins are forgiven and he's not on his way to hell anymore. And he's just rejoicing about that. He's got zeal, and that's so wonderful. There's like a baby. 1 Peter 2, verse 2 says, as newborn babes, desire the sincere milk of the word that ye may grow thereby. So there is something about this that is a babe in Christ. And new Christians, I found, will face hard things. Satan's after them. In fact, 1 Peter 5 says that Satan's like a lion seeking to whom he may devour. And maybe he doesn't come after you in the same way he does to a new believer, but he's after them too. And we can't assume that everyone is strong in the faith like you. They're going to need some help. So understanding that fragility, that's part of what it would be for us to be gentle in a motherly way to other believers. 2, understanding the ignorance of others. When you're first saved, what do you know? Do you remember those days when you were first saved? You don't know much. You got saved. The Bible's true. What does the Christian life look like? Yeah, you have the Holy Spirit. You have a supercharged conscience. But there's a lot of things you're not trying to not know. You just haven't had the time to know them yet. And so it's good for us to be patient with people that are just learning. There's this teaching in 1 Corinthians where Paul's talking about this meat and offered to idols. And he says, listen, we know that idols are nothing. But then he says, but there is not in every man that knowledge. He acknowledges That there are people who just don't know that. And you might say, that seems like the most obvious thing ever. And it does to you who have been saved for a long time and maybe heard some great preaching growing up, especially in those formative years. You don't even know all that's been invested in you. And here's this other person just starting off. And it's good for us just to understand they're fragile and they're ignorant. And we have to understand the way that people grow. The Christian growth is a process. It takes time, right? I remember being frustrated with my kids. They're not here, so I can tell all kinds of stories. No, I won't. But I remember being frustrated with my kids at certain times, like, why can't they get this? And I had to remember, they will. And they did. It just takes time. It takes reminding over the same thing over and over and over again. One of my kids, and I won't say who, there was like these math things that I was trying to teach them. And it was like every day we just kind of like erased the whiteboard in their brain. Remember talking about this yesterday? No. Okay, just put your shoes on the right feet. Those aren't the right feet, You gotta put please shut the door. Shut the door. Please shut the door. Please shut the door. Did anyone take care of the cat today? Please take care of the cat. Boots needs some attention. The master is calling. He needs us to clean out his litter box. Just over and over and over again. And I'll admit, I wasn't always a very patient dad. I'll admit that, but it's what's needed. There's a patience that's needed as they grow, and there's a patience that's needed when people fall. Galatians chapter 6, verse 1 says, if a man be overtaken in a fault, ye which are spiritual, restore such an one in the spirit of meekness. Why? Considering thyself, lest thou also be tempted. You would think this is the way it would go. Those who are spiritual would be the first to condemn someone who sinned and say, you've done the wrong thing, and I know that you've repented, but you must stay on the outside until you are properly vetted. And Galatians says the opposite. What are you talking about? If they've sinned and they're coming back, you who are spiritual especially should take the initiative to restore them. And if you don't, then you're going to fall into that same trap as well. I think it's an amazing thing that we have people in the church with the gift of mercies, to be able to have grace with people, and to maybe have a good memory. Yeah, I was there too. I've done some things that other people forgave me for, that the Lord forgave me for, and it's just you'll get there. Like being patient with people that, man, why can't they get this? It's the most obvious thing. Yeah, I know, I get it. It is the most obvious thing to you. It will be the most obvious thing to them eventually, but not now. So there's a process of growth. So what can you do to fill that mother's role for someone else? Well, you can bring others to Jesus Christ. Wouldn't it be an amazing thing? You give a tract to somebody this summer, and they get saved, and they start coming to church with you, and they start sitting with you, and they be like, can we do, like, I'm coming to Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night. This is great, but I want to ask questions. And you could call up the pastor and be like, hey, pastor, do you have a problem? Do you have I shouldn't use that voice, sorry. Hey, pastor, do you have a Tuesday open where you can have coffee with this person? Yeah, I would, absolutely. However, you're the one that brought them to church. You're the one they're sitting with. You're the voice in their life. That would be an amazing thing to have someone that you could help disciple. You could also help disciple people that are already here. When you look around on Sunday morning, there are a lot of people who need a lot of help, and they don't really know where to turn. And I'll be real honest, I don't have time to put in to everybody in the church every week. I'm willing to make time. I really am. But the way I look at ministry in general is that I have the preaching ministry, and this is kind of where the bulk of teaching and exhortation is going to happen. And if someone needs something extra, that's great, but it's always my hope that at some point they won't need the extra and they can just get from the regular church body what's needed. So if somebody needs prolonged help, it would be good for another mature believer to help them with that. Some other mother to come alongside and help them. Then I'll say too, just before I move on to the next quality that we need to find that balance of grace with people and not just accepting their sin. So you've maybe heard me say we need to be gentle on sin, and that's not what I'm saying. We need to be gentle with sinners, at the same time taking a strong stand against sin. So to try to find that balance where we're having grace with people and saying, yep, I get it. I know what you're going through, and I've been there too, and not just be like, oh, it's fine. Don't worry about it. So we have to find that balance. So that's the first quality. The second quality is sacrificial care. Paul and company came to impart to them the gospel. In verse number 8, so being affectionately desirous of you, we were willing to have imparted unto you not the gospel of God only, but also our own souls, because you were dear unto us. It was not an easy life. Paul was trying to help them, trying to teach, and also making tents, going from place to place. There's persecution. He never knew when the Jewish people from the last town were going to show up and be like, this is the guy that's turning the world upside down. So they often went without so that they could have what they needed. So the church, again, they could actually not just not take from the church, but actually give to the church. They did not want to be chargeable to anyone. They didn't want, where does it say that? Verse 9. For ye remember, brethren, our labor and travail, for laboring night and day, because we would not be chargeable unto any of you, we preached unto you the gospel of God. That word chargeable means heavy or severe. They labored and travailed night and day. They were working so that they could help these people. What drove this? Well, what drove it was being affectionately desirous. That's what he says in verse number 8, being affectionately desirous. This is the only time that this word is used in the New Testament, and it means to be burdened. Like if I say I'm affectionately desirous of something, you mean, oh, you really want this. But that's not really the idea here. The idea here is that it was a consuming burden for him that they would do well. How burdened? He was so burdened for them that he was willing to impart to them his own soul, his own life. Why? Because they were dear or beloved to him. I've realized this over the years, that nothing good can come without some sacrifice. And this is, again, is such a different way of looking at the world. There are problems in the world, and the church will often meet it. You know that Christians are, per capita, the most giving people. They're the ones giving to charities. They're the ones volunteering their time. They are trying to meet the needs of communities. And on the other side of an understanding is that the government should take care of all that. We should raise the taxes of millionaires so the government can take care of all this. And what kind of mess have we seen with the New Deal, which is government funding everything? We totally took away the human aspect. And one of the reasons I don't feel like it worked is that there was no sacrifice. When you pay your taxes, that's not a sacrifice. You're not willingly giving it. But when you spend a couple hours giving to someone else or some money to some cause, that's a sacrifice. And that means more. And I think that God does more with a sacrifice than he does with just regular payment and the way that things go. Right? Any gift is sacrificial. A gift means much more than a simple gesture. You ever gotten anything from somebody? And maybe it was a really little thing, but it just came at the right time. And whatever it was a monetary gift, it was an object. I'll tell you, and Marlene, I'm not going to embarrass you, but Marlene called me this week, and she said that she was out and bought me some fans. I had said a couple weeks ago I was looking for some fans, and she was thinking about me and went and bought me 2 fans to use in our home. And I had to tell her, sadly, we're done with the paint and we're done with it. But I told her, didn't I, Marlene, that was so touching that you would spend your own money to buy some fans for me. Now, thankfully, she's happy to have them and she can use them. And I'm grateful for that. But, it's a sacrifice that means something. And it's not just the money that was put down, but it's the sacrifice that was made. And Paul says, We sacrificed for you because the gospel is important. Now, there are lifestyles of sacrifice. There are voluntary giving up for benefits. And the number one sacrificers, and you maybe don't even think of it this way, but the number one sacrificers are parents. And you sacrifice a lot as a parent. Early on, you sacrifice sleep, money, desires. I just want to blank, but the kids. I want to spend my money. I want to spend my time. I want to do this, but we can't because the kids. And we do it willingly, right? It is a sacrifice. We just don't think of it necessarily like that, whatever it is. I'm grateful for the police in our area willing to sacrifice their lives, their safety. And honestly, maybe you don't even think about this, but their wives and their kids sacrifice quite a bit as well. How many Christmases was Dad not there? How many times they heard sirens and they wondered, is my dad out there? Is my mom out there trying to, catch the bad guys? What's going on? They hear stories of people. And there's a lot of sacrifice that goes on in that. Our friends, we talked about friends this morning, and our deepest friends are the ones that are ready to drop anything for us. Your deepest friends are the ones that you don't say, I'm sorry to ask, but you just say, hey, I have a need. And they say, what is it? I'll help you, whatever the problem is. Paul's sacrifice showed his love. So that's how, in a lot of ways, they came to know Christ. They said, oh, this is real. You're not here to take, you're here to give. And that speaks a lot more than these other people that were coming through. Now, when a sacrifice is made, what does that mean? First, a sacrifice shows the value of the message. It's worth imparting. Then when you give a message and you give everything, that's worth imparting. You maybe heard about the Battle of Marathon, and there was this great battle between some Greek armies, and a courier ran 26.2 miles to tell the victory in Athens, and he yelled the word victory and died. And it was that's why marathons are 26.2 miles, because that was the length that this man ran to try to give the news of what had happened. And we remember that because, wow, what a sacrifice to deliver a message. Paul's message was so important, and that sacrifice that he made enhanced the message. A sacrifice also shows the value of the recipient. If someone sacrifices for me, it shows the love and the care for me. I don't have fans, but I have, what I understand, love from a sister in Christ. And I'm grateful for that. That means a lot to me. Paul's sacrifice showed them the value that they had to God, that they were worth sacrificing for. Paul couldn't have talked about Christ's sacrifice on the cross and then be like, but I'm not going to do that for you. As Christians, we follow his examples. Of course, sacrifice is at the center of the gospel. Again, that God saw me as a sinner, destined for punishment in hell, and Christ came to this earth. He gave up his glory to come and live among us. He died on the cross, being separated from his Father, the most important thing to him, for me. And he gave me life, and all who trust in him will be saved from God's wrath. So let me ask you, what sacrifices are you willing to make for Christian growth in others? Paul was willing to get a second job. He was willing to go without. He was willing to go hungry. He says in other places, we were shipwrecked, we were stoned, we were beaten with rods, all these things, a night I've spent in the deep, all for the gospel's sake, all for the people that he was giving the gospel. He says in, I think it's 1 or 2 Timothy, I endure all things for the elect's sake. He was ready to do whatever. So what sacrifices are you willing to make for Christian growth in others? Are you willing to sacrifice your time? Inviting others over, starting to converse. Are you willing to sacrifice your pride? I know it's a really hard thing to tell other people about Christ sometimes because you just, wow, what are they going to think of me? Well, I don't know. Maybe they won't think very well of you at all. But are you willing to make the sacrifice to say, I'm going to find out by being a witness, putting yourself out there? What would someone in the church think if I just went up and said, hey, can we meet sometime? I just want to talk to you, find out how you're doing, and I'm just going to be intentional about my investment in you. And yet maybe it won't go like you think it will, but Are you willing to sacrifice maybe a little bit of embarrassment if it goes badly for the potential of being in someone's life for a long time? Are you willing to sacrifice your resources to meet the needs of other Christians? So many people, I think we all admit, have really sacrificed for us. A lot of people have spent a lot of time investing in us. A lot of people have invested in us financially. We all understand that we're at the place we're at because of a lot of other people made sacrifices for us. Yeah, and that doesn't happen by accident. Let's not just take that for granted. The third quality, the first quality is being gentle like a mother. The second is to be sacrificial. And the third quality that we see here is comforting like a father. In verse 11, he says, "You know how we exhorted and comforted and charged every one of you as a father doth his children." They were well aware of how Paul had been. He was like a father. Now, what had he done? He mentioned three things. One, he had exhorted them. The word there, exhorting, is the word parakaleo, or the word comfort. And the idea is to call someone near. If you have a problem, you say, I just need someone to come and sit with me. Maybe you wouldn't say that, but that's the idea, to call someone near, to come alongside you. So that's what Paul did. He was an exhorter. He would come alongside them and say, let's do this, let's go, we can do this, you and I together. Not you need to do this, but let's do this together. Second, he comforted them. Now again, sometimes the word parakaleo that's comfort. In this case, it's a different Greek word. It's the word paramutho. I practiced this at home. Mutheomai. It means to relate near, to encourage, or to console. And third, he charged them. Martyreo, which means to witness or to testify. He told the truth. He reported to them the truth. He had buttressed this exhorting and comforting and charging with the example of godliness. Verse number 10, ye are witnesses, and God also, how holily and justly and unblameably we behaved ourselves among you that believe. He was living that life consistent with Christ, which gave him the credibility and the capital, if you will, to exhort and comfort and charge. Paul was taking authority like a father, but he was doing it with love and concern and care. As a father, in my own home, I have to take authority. I have to say this is the way it's going to be. But I want my children to know I'm saying this because I love you and I care about you. There's a certain point in my kids' lives, and I've done 4 out of 5 now so far. Ben's still waiting, but there comes a certain time where I say, hey, listen, you're going to be a teenager soon. You're going to have all these thoughts. You're going to be kind of exploring who you are. And through all of this, you just need to know I'm on your side. It's going to sound like I'm fighting against you at times. You're going to think that I'm trying to smash your fun and make it hard for you, and I promise you I'm not. I'm on your side. So be open with me, talk with me. If I do something that irritates you, I need you to talk to me about it. I'm not saying I'll change because I'm the authority, but I'll at least know about it, and I want to do what I can because I'm on your side, right? Coming alongside, but I'm still the authority. I'm not saying you have now a seat at the table. I'm going to poll the family, and certain things we do, obviously, but, when it comes down to it, I'm going to be the one that makes the decision, right? So what does a father do? What is it that a father does that is talked about here? One, a father corrects when there's needed correction. He talks about this in Hebrews chapter 12. We had fathers of our flesh which corrected us, and we gave them reverence. Shall we not much rather be in subjection unto the Father of spirits and live? And it's different for everybody. You read in 1 Thessalonians, and there's a much more gentle tone. You read Galatians, and he's kind of, what is wrong with you? Because sometimes that's what your kids need, especially those kids. How is it that I was just there, and you just so quickly turned away? But he needed to kind of scare them and be really harsh with them because they were in danger. No parent, as they sees their children run out into the street, says, watch out. Be careful, right? You scream with everything you have, and if you can, run to grab them. You have to tackle them to the ground, whatever it takes. And sometimes a father has to do that to correct. He writes to the Corinthians, and he chided them because they were acting like children. You're carnal. What are you doing? He has to call it out. But it's different for every church that he's talking to because he's trying to correct them. He also then, secondly, encourages them when they need encouragement. Fathers are to urge on those good and better things that they see. They're to spur us on. Sometimes, I think early on, I thought my job as a parent is to say, no, 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 no. Don't do that, don't do that, don't do that. And I realized along the way, you know what? Yes is good too. Yeah, that's what I want. Keep doing that thing. That's it. That's it. Yes, please, more of that. That's good too, right? Positive reinforcement, they call it. I just think it's encouragement. Yes, keep doing that. Fathers know that there are times of discouragement when those under you are wanting to quit. You say, listen, I know you want to quit, but keep going, keep going. It's not always easy to know. I'll be real honest, I don't know. With Caleb and some of his endeavors, I have a lot of admiration for him because I don't have the entrepreneurial spirit at all. But it's such a nerve-wracking thing for me. And what do you do, And the only thing I can do right now is best I can encourage him and help him to see, yeah, keep going. And when he wants to quit, say, no, I think you can push through this. And sometimes when there's something he wants to quit that I think he should quit, just say, yeah, I think that's wise. That's very good. I don't know what that is all the time, but, praying for wisdom. And sometimes fathers need to encourage in those things. And so as you're looking at people in the church and they're doing the right thing, oh, man, that's great. Keep doing that. If they're doing the wrong thing, hey, you'll get this. Let's try again. Let's go. We can do this. I think third, fathers teach us the lessons that we need to learn. Fathers teach us about the way of the world, how to work, how to act, what the things we should do. One of the reasons our society is so messed up is we have so many single moms. We made that just fine. Again, the government came in and subsidized single motherhood, made it even an advantage. And I know it happens, but for it to, some people are doing it with no intention of even having a father in the picture. And we're seeing the kind of society that we're seeing now because of that. Paul viewed himself in that role. He said in 1 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 15, "For though ye have 10,000 instructors in Christ, yet have ye not many fathers. For in Christ Jesus I have begotten you through the gospel." A father is a good role to play. He's saying it's not just more instruction that you need. You need someone to come and teach you and guide you and care for you and look after you. So how can I show this care to others? First, those that need your help to be corrected and encouraged and taught. New parents need to be taught how to raise their kids. It didn't come just naturally. Okay, since I'm embarrassing people tonight, I was talking with Seth and Jazz last night, and I was just saying how much of our parenting we learned from Alice. Just what a blessing she was. When we moved here, we had a 1-year-old Caleb, and we were still pretty new, and there were a lot of things that we just picked Alice's brain and learned a lot of parenting from her, and you're one of those investments. And Alice, if you are ever happy about the way that our kids turned out, you can thank the Lord for the role that you played in that. New Christians need to be taught how to give, how to serve, how to read their Bible. They need help with that. They need you to ask, hey, how are things going? And I get it, because you might be at some point like, at what point are they going to get it? I don't know. But like a parent, like a father, you wait them out and you stick with them. That's what's needed. That's what we do. New church members who need welcoming. People that are coming in and they have no idea. They've never been to this church, and maybe they're like looking for the rock band and they don't see it up here, and they're like, okay, at what point do we do the little kneeling thing? And we're like, we don't really do that here. And they're not sure. Like, you're the kind of people that bring out snakes. What's going to happen? And they need somebody to be like, hey, let me just walk you through this. I feel like it's a pretty normal church, but man, you'd be surprised by how many people come in and they're like, that's not what I was expecting at all. The singing was like, wow, it's really loud. I'm like, yeah, that's great. Need that. That sermon was really long. I'm expecting like 20 minutes. I'm like, yeah, you're not going to get 20 minutes. I even tried to do a 20-minute sermon this morning and way overshot that. Anyway, just people that are coming in just need a little bit of help. They need hand-holding. And maybe you don't like to hold hands, but you're really grateful that someone held yours. So let's be encouraged in that. How can I show this care to others? Positions of authority in the church to help guide. I feel like, if I were to exhort any kind of authority or say, hey, can I help you with this? That would be prideful. Well, it certainly could. Yeah, but it doesn't have to be. Right? You're listening to me right now. Does that mean anything about me? No. Like, am I somebody special? Am I somebody great because you're there listening to me talk? No. This is a special gifting that God's given me that I didn't ask for and that he's asked me to use. And so I'm preaching I wouldn't say in the stead of Christ, but hopefully by the Spirit of Christ to be able to help you so that but this isn't an authority thing. Like, it doesn't have to be that way. I know pastors sometimes think that it is, but it doesn't have to be that way. I'm saying we as a church, let's get together and do this together. So that position of authority, there are those who need help. They need a guide to help them. They need someone to say, this is the way it should be. This is the way it is. They need you to say, this is pretty black and white. Now, again, you can bring some gray in. I'm just saying, like, there are other people in the church that need your expertise. And you can say all you want. I don't feel like there is expertise. But if you benefited from anything that the Lord's taught you, you can pass that on to somebody else. Then thirdly, how do I show this care to others? Start to show care and love. Again, start with children. Again, it's not just that I remember Phil Martin, Reed Eby, Jim Schrock. I remember Grandma Ruth. I don't even know her last name. I just know she lived around the corner, and she was a member of our church. And I think once in a while she would babysit us, but we'd go to her house, and she did 5-day clubs, and she didn't do the story, but she hosted it in her house, and it was an old house. I remember there just being like old stuff around, and but I just remember her just being so sweet and kind. She would make cookies for the Bible clubs, and we would go to those, and it was somebody from the church would come and do a little Bible club for the people, and she was just known in the neighborhood as a very sweet person. And I wonder if you know who your neighbors are, and if the neighborhood kids are able to come to your house, and I know, like, there's an influence there, and I know that there's something where it's like, but do you know, like, the struggling mom who's real close to you, or someone else? Do you know, like, the cashier, the waitress? Do you know them and kind of their story? And again, I'm just trying to encourage you over and over and over again to not be so, like, in your own bubble, to not just be so, this is my life. And I know a lot of you, I'm not going to try to look at anybody when I say this. This is something I want to talk about in 2 weeks on Sunday morning, so I'm not going to try to spoil it, but let me just practice it here. I know that many of you retired, and the idea is I want free time to do what I want, and I want to give you as much of that free time with guilt-free as possible. Okay? That's a wonderful thing to retire. And I wouldn't say, well, you still have to put in your 40. I know. I've talked to enough retired people to know that you're putting in your 40 with lots of other things. I'm just wondering if there's, here we go. Just wondering if there's room for ministry in a fatherly, a motherly, a sacrificial giving to be a blessing and a help to someone who could really need you. And I wonder if in 20 years, if there's going to be a preacher standing behind this pulpit saying, anybody remember so-and-so in the church, and say your name? Maybe you're gone to glory. Maybe you're still sitting there, and they just say, man, I'm so glad that that person invested in me and helped me. And one of the friendliest faces I remember is that face on Sunday mornings. And whatever influence you can have, man, God gives you that opportunity. I think it's really, really great to take it. So God can use you to show care. He can start to build the lives of faith in others, and I hope you'll take the opportunity, like Paul, to do that.